StarCast is proudly sponsored by DoghouseSystems.com. If you use the code StarCast or Biscuit at checkout, you will get double memory on your next Doghouse system. And also TweakedAudio.com. Go to TweakedAudio.com for high-performance noise-reducing earbuds. Use our code StarCast and get 30% off plus free shipping on your entire order. And finally, SC2QuoteOfTheDay.com. Daily quotes from the StarCraft 2 community. The site may suck, but the quotes are sick. And make sure to go check out their t-shirts in their new store. Once again, that's SC2QuoteOfTheDay.com, and we thank them for their support. Sponsor an episode of StarCast at thestarcast.com.
Hell, it's about damn time for StarCast.
Incoming transmission.
Biscuit.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the 146th episode of StarCast, the StarCraft podcast. I'm Garrett Weinzerl, and with me, as always, is Kyle Ferguson. Kyle, dude, it's Thursday. It's April 4th. We survived the awful jokes and pranks of April 1st. How you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. And yes, we did survive. It's harder on the internet, too, because you can't look people in the face. Of course, you always have to deal with habitual liars in your life who you never know if they're telling the truth anyway. But the internet, that's just one big pile of habitual liars. So that was a little rough, particularly running news shows and that sort of thing. But I'm very excited. We're live. Last few weeks we haven't been live. It's been pre-recorded. So Hello, everyone there. And the GSL is back, which is super awesome. I've been waiting for that because I need to see some Heart of the Swarm play.
Oh, I'm jealous. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Any good games so far?
You know, it really kind of snowballs itself. At first, you're like, because it starts with Bomber, who's very conservative right now about experiment. I mean, other than emergency thrusters, he's not into too many units. But then he starts throwing in some Widow Mines, and before you know it, you have hordes of Tempests in the air, and it was a good time. No Swarm hosts, though.
Well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that today because this is the third and final week for our Heart of the Swarm race-specific Noobisodes, and we're closing it out with, the race that Heart of the Swarm is kind of celebrating, the Zerg. And joining us to be the pro to guide us through the darkness and show us how not to be noobs is a friend of the show who's been on here quite a few times now, Jacob, better known to many of you as LzGaMeR. Jacob, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
So how are you doing, man? How's Heart of the Swarm treating you?
I mean, you know, it's like a brand new game, so it has like, you know, remnants of Wings of Liberty, but then some of the stuff that you were used to in Wings is like completely different. Like, forget about the Infestor, forget about Zerg Turtle. It's now all about like Zerg aggression. So, but I'm really loving it. Like, I actually prefer Heart of the Swarm way more and having much more fun with Heart of the Swarm than I ever did with Wings of Liberty. So, it's all positive from here on out. Nice.
That's great to hear, because anytime a new competitive game comes out, it's the first thing you're just like, brace yourself for the negative feedback from the community. But this has been a stellar launch. Maybe I'm just coming off of SimCity, which was the worst launch in history.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It helped Blizzard that the worst launch happened right before their launch, because then it made ours look like 10 times better.
I think it even retroactively made stuff like the Diablo 3 launch look better.
Yeah, so, kind of.
Just putting that out there. Good job, EA. Thank you. Making the expectations lower. But that aside, it was a great launch. Obviously, we had no problems really whatsoever. Some Zerg would argue they're like, problems. Emergency thrusters are still in the game. What's going on?
I mean, there'll always be negative. They could remove everything Terran got, and there'll still be people like, Terran's so strong right now because our fungal got nerfed, or, you know, there'll always be somebody to cry about something or another. So you just have to, you know, kind of look past all of the OP whine to look for like the valid facts and stuff. And it doesn't look like, you know, it's that bad. It might be a hard matchup for Zerg, but I think it's more that, you know, there's new things that Zerg have to do that they never had to do before. Like, if you think of back in Wings of Liberty, where Terran versus Baneling was like impossible, and then Marine King came out and showed, hey, if you actually control your units perfectly, like, you can actually, you know, take hardly no damage from Banelings. Well, then everyone was like, well, sure, that's okay for pros, but now we have gold level players able to perform that same level of task or micro, to where now it's like in Heart of the Swarm, Zerg has to kind of do the same thing So when you're attacking, you have to spread everything out, so you take a lot less damage from the mine shots and stuff, right? So to me, it's just a new element to the game that really raises the skill ceiling more than something where it just needs to be automatically fixed or corrected.
Definitely. For all the races, I feel like Zerg had the most retooling. It doesn't feel like an expansion at all. Certainly with Brood War, for example, that kind of felt like a unit just kind of dropped on top of us. Here it is. Oh, by the way, the Mutalisk also turns into, what was it, that big fat thing in the air. I don't remember its name. Not the Guardian, but the anti-air version.
Devour.
There you go.
That thing was hideous.
That was awesome. Are you kidding?
The Guardian was an uglier design, if you ask me. It was a giant floating crab. But anyways, I've got giant floating crabs in my head now, and it's funny. But anywho, I guess let's get into it. I mean, we're already kind of talking stuff, but I guess generally, how has Heart of the Swarm kind of changed your play?
Well, it brought out more of like aggressive styles of play. So whether it's you're playing versus Protoss and you're actually able to use Hydralisk, so it's kind of like a new unit for us, because in Wings of Liberty it was almost like, like it was there, but don't build it. It's actually a trap from Blizzard. Like if you build that unit, you're actually just going to lose, right? So now they gave it, so it's actually a much more mobile unit, and you can be really aggressive with that. And then they also have like Vipers, which allow for lots of cool play, like Abduct and Blinding Cloud. So it really just makes Zerg an aggressive race in Heart of the Swarm, I find, to where in Wings of Liberty they had the god tier late game army, so there was no reason to attack early. You just sit behind 35 spine crawlers and spores, and you just wait it out. And so, to be honest, laddering like that was really painful, because every game had to go into like the 30-minute mark before you were actually at your like strongest point, to where now you're actually at your strongest point at like the 20-minute mark, and then from then on it's kind of slowly downhill. So it completely changed the way the race works and as a whole.
Would you say it got rid of the kind of reactionary play too that we were seeing? Because everyone's always said Zerg's reactionary. You should save your larva until you see what's coming at you.
No, you're still reactionary. Like if you build roaches, be like, all right, I'm just going to build some roaches now, and then it's like you're not going to do anything with the roaches. Well, it actually hurts you, because you could have had more drones at that point. So regardless, Zerg is always going to be the reactionary race, just due to the fact of how their mechanic system works, where everything turns into the same thing. Like your larva is not only your potential economy, but also your potential army. So it will always and forevermore be the reactionary race.
I feel like now that we can actually use Hydralisk too, we need to have unit compositions. It's not just hold the button and that's what you need to win the fight.
Right. Yeah, it definitely comes in more where you have more options of what to go. And I mean, swarm hosts are also another great example of that too. It's like sometimes situations will occur where it's like, you know what, if I had some swarm hosts right now, that'd be really good. And so before you know it, you're not just holding down the A making only swarm hosts, you actually have like 10 swarm hosts in an army of roaches and hydras to combat maybe a High Templar gateway army, for example, or an immortal army. So it definitely gives you more room to experiment with different army compositions and stuff. And I don't think even most of it's even figured out. I think very little of it's actually, figured out at all. Like it's still a lot of mystery out there of what's the best like play styles versus the matchups and best build orders currently out there.
Well, I think a good example of that is a swarm host. We still haven't seen a lot of use in it tournament-wise. I mean, especially looking back to the MLG, which was kind of the first full tournament we've had. There was like barely any swarm host play. Granted, a lot of Zerg got knocked out pretty soon. So,
yeah, I was expecting to see a lot of new styles in play, like in the GSL. Like when MLG happened, a lot of the Korean players didn't have much time to practice or prep for it. Well, now that like the GSL happened last night, and I was expecting to see a lot of like revolutionary type play or something, I actually just saw like people play like it was Wings of Liberty, and so I was kind of really shocked and a little bit disappointed in it, that there was no cute build orders. Of course, maybe those aren't the creative players in Korea, so maybe this coming week we might see some of those new builds or new transitions that people try to make.
Probably the most disappointing thing was the ZVZ last night was exactly what we thought it would be. Muta versus Muta. And there's a lot of griping going on online about that. Mutalisk got the new speed, a lot more regen. It's just so unthrilling.
It's rough. It's like the Mutalists need the speed and the regen in Zerg versus Terran and Zerg versus Protoss to be useful, but then in Zerg versus Zerg, it almost breaks the matchup to where it's like it's so hard to hit a fungal on the Mutas because they're so fast, and then if they spread out, then it's like absolutely like you shoot 3 fungals and you might land 3 Mutas or 4 Mutas right out of a group of like 11. So it just makes it to the point where Mutalisk are the strongest, and the only builds that there are to counter the Mutas are almost like timing attack / all-in builds. So Blizzard knows that there's a problem. That's the reason they were like, we'll buff the Spore. And it's like, all right, well, that's great if I just want to sit in my base all day, but how am I attacking? And that's the real problem, because then you have, and it's the same problem that a lot of Zergs are crying about and complaining, because you hear of like Zergs like Protoss air armies OP. Like we just don't have a good anti-air. And that's really the case. Reason Mutas dominate is because what does Zerg have to hit air? Hydras, okay. But then there's Zerglings and Banelings, and both of those do great against the Hydralisk. And then the other option is Fungal, but then it not only does it take more Fungals to kill the Muta because they have the HP regen bonus, but also you have to land it, so it's even harder to hit too. So, yeah. So it's definitely a Muta world as far as ZVZ goes currently.
Yeah, it's funny, Kyle. As you know, I don't play a lot of Zerg, but lately I've been playing a bunch of team games with my buddies. So I've gotten in now and been playing a Zerg, and now I see your pain with trying to land fungals on Mutas. It's ridiculous.
Not as easy as it used to be. And the hope is, of course, with the Hydralisk, as you just said, Jacob, it's just like it makes sense. And then maybe a Nidus Worm, yeah, because if I'm trapped in my base and I need to get into your base, well, this should be a natural progression.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think the best like blind counter, and it really works really well nowadays. If somebody opens Muta and you go like roaches with the mass queens and you just Nidus their base or right outside their base and you just walk, they're dead. Like there's nothing that they can do because you're talking about like upgraded roaches versus regular Zerglings, and then Mutalisk versus the queens. So and it hits like at 9:30. So it's right as Mutas pop up pretty much. So if you're thinking like, a Zerg that saved up all of its minerals and gas would make 9 Mutas at the start, well, that would hit, and so you'd have like 7 queens versus 9 Mutas, and your queens would have transfused. So there's no way they could engage, and it's just like a victory screen right off the bat. The downside is a lot. I've done that to so many players that people actually know about it now, and they're like, wait a second, we're not making Mutas. We're going to go into roaches now. So there is negative sides to it, but those are the only builds that really work really well versus the Muta type of play, just for how it is. I mean, I wish Hydras, I don't know if they could have the armor type. I don't know if that would help, but then I would think Immortal Rushes would crush them even harder if that was the case. So I don't know.
Yeah. Certainly it'd be nice for the Colossus. But...
Or if they just made him a biological unit. They just like removed the whole light armor so that Banelings didn't absolutely demolish them. They would still do well, but they wouldn't just crush.
Just drop the light modifier.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
An idea.
Well, Blizzard, get on it. You've got balance designers. Put them to work.
Blizzard needs to hire me.
There you go. You got a man for you right here.
Well, they were all too busy sitting at the GSL last night where Mike Morheim bought everyone pizza.
Oh, that's so nice.
It was cool. It was cool to see
pizza.
David Kim hanging out there and everyone supporting it. It's cool to see them streamlining it. But the whole GSL kind of got us off track of the Noobisode part here. So let's go back to basics.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So I think the first question we've kind of been bringing up the past few weeks is what are the most common mistakes you see beginner Zerg players making? Now, of course, there's the common mistakes that everyone makes regardless of race, like poor macroing skills.
I think, I get where the question's going. I coach a lot, so I see mistake after mistake. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of players make is actually just not droning enough. Like, that's it. Like, players will put they'll barely saturate a base and they'll be like, all right, it's time to start pumping roaches and Zerglings. And then it's like, but they have no plan of attacking. They're just building an army, right? Like, if you're going to build that army, then you need to also be putting pressure on your opponent, attacking, those type of things. But a lot of players just play they don't worry about an economy as much. And with Zerg, it's one of the races that you get punished if you don't worry about the economy, because economy is everything with Zerg. Because our units are not cost efficient at all. Like, it's just not. If you want to play, one base versus one base and win versus any race, it's going to have to be a ZVZ or something, because there's no way you're beating a Protoss or a Terran if you're both just doing like an all-in one base build.
Unless you get really lucky and a Terran's making nothing but Marines and you went Banelings. And
yeah,
even
maybe.
then, then.
But then maybe not. I don't know. You're not going to get too many Banelings off of just a one-base gas.
That's
at that point
true.
you're hoping for a ramp
And if you
down.
tech up to layer with Baneling speed, I'd be impressed. Like, that would really cut into the economy and the army. So
yeah, it's very rough.
So that's one of the big problems that I see a lot of Zergs make. They just don't know when they can drone and when they can make army.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Now, have you been coaching since Heart of the Swarm? Is that as common now that, like, right there stamped on your bases, you should have this many drones?
Yeah, it's always a factor. In Wings of Liberty it was, and then Blizzard gave them a number over their hatchery and they still do it. So nothing's changed. Nothing changed. That's still a big problem that players make, and they just need to figure, like, what they should have. Like, mineral line should always have 16 workers at it. That's the optimal saturation. So you should think, if you're playing a normal game, you want 3 bases, 3, and 16 drones at each mineral line, 3 drones per gas, and there you go. You're fully saturated for a nice 3-base play, which will take you forever.
Sweet. I hope you guys are taking notes out there. What about moving on in basics? The joke with our show has always been when people are writing in, like, I don't know how do I get better, or I keep losing to this. How do I counter this or whatever? And our thing is, like, you just scout. If you just got better at scouting, you would know what was coming. So, do you have any scouting tips for Zerg specifically? I mean, how much should I rely on overlords or speedlings or?
Well, Heart of the Swarm helped this a lot. You can actually open a super early, and I mean by super early, I mean like you could have it at like 6:30. You could actually have overlord speed, and this is not like cutting queens or something. You still have a queen per hatchery, and you can also have overlord speed to where you could just run in there and see everything your opponent has, and then you're able to make those decisions of what you need. So if you see a Dark Shrine, you're like, I'm going to need a Spore. Of course, Spore is the answer to almost every cheese build. If you think of it like, uh-oh, he's going Void Rays, what do I need? Spore. He's going Dark Templars, what do I need? A Spore. He's going Phoenixes or Oracles, what do I need? Spore, right? So Spores are like the anti. So if you're unsure what your opponents do, if you can't get a good scout, throw a Spore at every base. Like
Spores are the change to Spores is still live, right? You can build them straight off of a spawning pool now.
Yeah. You don't have to even have an evolution chamber now. So
yeah, which
actually hurts me in Heart of the Swarm, because now I forget to build evolution chambers in Zerg versus Protoss. I don't know why either. It's just it happens. It's like I'm like, oh, okay, I'll make roaches and hydras, and then before I realize I have a maxed army, never upgraded, and then I'm like, you know why this happened? Because I built a Spore and I was thinking I had evolution chambers.
See, I've been doing the exact opposite in my 2s lately, where I play Zerg. I'll see, like, oh crap, here comes something that's cloaked. I throw down my evolution chamber and wait for it to finish before I build a Spore. So it's a mental thing. So if you're new to Heart of the Swarm, this is probably good for you. You don't have these old habits that you have to kind of beat out of your head. Anything else? I mean, running your lings in and burrowing them at expansions is still a pretty awesome thing.
Course. And Burrow is now hatchery tech, so you could even get that even earlier. So you could deny like third bases, and for Protoss that were going, let's say, Stargate with a really fast third base or something that didn't get an observer, it slows them down for a long time, because they have to build a pylon, and then they have to build a cannon, and then after the cannon's complete, then they can build a third base. So there are lots of different ways that you can go about to scout or even stall. But since we're talking about scouting, changelings obviously are a way to scout in like the mid game to what your opponent's going for, which you should always have an overseer, just dropping a changeling or even just sacrificing a zergling here and there just to see what kind of army composition your opponent has. because that tells you what you need, right? Like if you see your opponents making lots of Colossus, you don't want to make Hydralisk, for example.
No.
And so, or same for like High Templars, you don't want to make Hydras in that predicament. So there is different things you can do. One of the things that I teach is to set up your first 2 Overlords at different locations to where you can suicide them in and scout what your opponent has. So one, to be able to scout the natural expansion, assuming your opponent expanded, or to even see when he throws down an expansion, or and then your other Overlord to suicide into the main. So every map has lots of places that you can put Overlords to be like at a safe place and then just suicide them in. So that's one thing that I always teach Zergs to do, just because information is knowledge with or is power. Information is power. Yeah, that's how the phrase goes.
Knowledge is power.
Get it? Knowledge is power. Whatever. However it goes, you know what I mean. And so
I felt it.
You felt it. Yeah, we had a heart-to-heart, Kyle. All right, so that's pretty much the gist of it when it comes to scouting.
Cool.
That sounds like a great basic, like something every player needs to do from the get-go. Make sure those first 2 Overlords are in good position so you can use them later. Going through the brackets, what kind of stuff would you add on? So like we have Queens that can make larva and creep spread. And I've seen a number of players in Bronze have beautiful creep spread, but nothing else going on because that's what they saw in the professional game online.
Right. You just need the map covered. It's just like toxic. It does AoE damage.
Right?
Damage to
That's
players.
what I want anyway. If you get in someone else's base, damn it, that should be melting a building or
It should
something.
start contaminating it. That would be awesome.
It does graphically now, but it does absolutely nothing.
I know.
Looks nice.
We need those ones from the campaign where you just park the infester on the little dot and it just starts spewing out infested Terrans.
Yeah, I'm actually really sad that they didn't put in the other Nidus worm that they were planning on putting in, which is like freaking dragon pops up and starts shooting. Like
Yeah, they were gonna have, I think, 3 different types when it was all said and done.
Yeah, one that was like laid a creep highway. I was thinking how awesome it was going to be. I was like, I'm never making another tumor ever again. I'm just going to make one of those and just start spewing it everywhere. It's going to be thick.
Yeah, and then they were just like, yeah, it didn't pan out.
Yeah, they toyed with me.
I want that back, and I want the battlecruiser speed back.
All right, so I got us off topic. What was this question about? Where were we going with it, Kyle?
I think we were going with larva and queen management. Is that what you were going, Kyle?
So through the different leagues, what would you say a bronze player needs to learn and then build on moving forward with queens and early game in mind?
I think bronze level players just need to learn like hotkeys and using the keyboard. Like that's all bronze is. Bronze is nothing but macro. Like all you have to do, if you can have anywhere decent, like spending your money and building stuff, you win. It doesn't even matter what you build or what happens. So I would say like first advice to a bronze is just learn their race, whatever race you're playing, whether it's Zerg, Protoss, or Terran. And with Zerg, just learn how to hotkey everything, and easy ways to inject I think are really good too. There's lots of different tricks, like the backspace method that you can bind to like the spacebar, for example, so that you actually can do nothing but hit V, spacebar, and left click at the same time, and you inject all your hatcheries all the way through. Right. So there's
I do that. I have it on tilde.
Yep, tilde works too. I think machine also has it on tilde, but I do spacebar because it's really big and you can't miss it.
Yeah, and it's very close to V.
And it's very close to V. You know, one finger macro right there.
Bam! If you ever wanted to impress your friends with an APM spike, that's how you do it. It's
that's
ridiculous how fast your APM shoots up.
8 queens, 8 hatcheries, instant inject all the way through. So that's one way to do it. It just like that's the very basics. As far as if it's better to worry about if your APM is not up there and you have to choose like, do I creep spread or do I inject? Inject's 100 times better than creep spread. Like creep spread helps, but it's one of those little things that would make you a little bit better, to where inject's one of those things that would make you a lot better.
Yeah, it seems like it comes down. That's true of all 3 races. Whatever it is that helps your production, be it Mules with Terran, Chrono Boost with Protoss, or Larva Inject with Zerg. That's a big divider between the very kind of noobish people and people who have a semi handle of the game. What about heavy queen play? I mean, Kyle, you're a big fan of this.
Yes. Well, and I actually, I really enjoyed DRG's play when he was doing that. But actually, about a year ago, LZ, you put out a replay of a real late, like no gas Zerg build that I just loved, where you got queens and spines and didn't get gas until about 6-10 minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot of builds I do with mass queens. I think queens are like one of the best units and definitely one of the most underrated units out there because transfuse is so strong. Like transfuse can make a fight go from you're totally losing to you didn't lose a unit. Like if you like there's a lot of examples out there. Like I think Husky's probably casted like 30 of my replays of just my queen builds to where it's like queen ultra, like a late game army composition with like a few infestors to like hold them down. Those armies are absolutely insane. Like the trade value you can get in for like a Marine, Marauder, even Widowmine type of army comp. Like the mines all shoot, you heal the ultras all back up, and then you engage. Like it does nothing, you know. So mass queen builds are good, but they're not anything that like new players should be worrying about because they're like another level up from that. Because it's a lot that you have to do because you constantly have to be building more queens and injecting back at home, but you also have to be constantly adding those to a group. And then you in the big battles, it's not about just moving your army or worrying about reproducing more. It's about focusing on which ones are being hit by by fire or focused on first so that you can constantly keep transfusing those back up to full health. So it is a really awesome way of playing, and I'm pretty sure eventually, someday, I've been saying this for like a year now, and I'm still like one of the 5 Zergs that actually play this way. There will be more like Kespa Zergs and top Korean Zergs out there that play this way.
I look forward to that day. I find Heavy Queen play so entertaining to watch, just because when someone's very good with transfuse micro, it's so damn impressive.
Well, it's so misleading going against it to have that army suddenly still there. Doesn't work as well as it did against mutas in the past, but that's certainly where I used it a lot.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Damn, regenning mutas ruin everything.
Now, here's a basic question. Happens to everyone as you get playing. You're battling. Maybe you defend. Maybe you go into their base. You're winning. You lose. Well, let's take each one individually, but you floated a bunch of minerals because you were enjoying the fight. What's the best way to drop all that money at once?
All that money at once? Like, what part of the game are we at during this?
About mid-game, when you would have for a new player, an enjoyable army where you would...
Enjoyable army.
Yeah, where you would throw all the macro to the wind.
Very technical, Kyle.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's what the game's
so what's
about.
Yeah, but everyone has a different idea of an enjoyable army. My enjoyable army is like 200 supply mutas. That's an enjoyable army for me. So what is your enjoyable army?
It would be, well, for me, it's definitely, it'd be Ultralisks. But
that's a great way to keep your macro down. Let me tell you, any player who's struggling, like, man, I just can't seem to get my minerals and gas below 4,000. It's like, well, you build an Ultralisk cavern, you hit the S button, and then you proceed to hit the U button, and all your money disappears like instantly. Because they are that expensive, and they're great actually for that. You know, if like you're having macro problems, build Ultras. Those are great.
Kyle, you asked a similar question to, I can't even remember. It was either Nama or Hearthstone. And I think they said, well, it depends on the outcome of your skirmish. If you're on top, you should expand. If you're not, you should look for a counterattack and prepare for it.
I mean, it just depends on the situation. Like, it's hard to say. I mean, if you're having money problems, spending money in general, like, you should always be throwing down an extra macro hatch. And I teach this to players all the time. Like, it's better to have extra hatches. Like, I don't care if you watch an Idra replay and he has 4 hatches on 3 base. If you have to have 6 hatches on 3 base to keep your macro down, that's better than to have 3k minerals at just a random point in the game to be like, if only I had larva, or I would have injected better, I would have done this. Because I watched the TLO stream the other day and he only had 4 hatches, so that's how many I should have at this point. Because, to be honest, it'd be better to have 6. This is like to the gold and platinum leaguers out there. Because if you have like 6 hatches, or any rank really, just whoever you are. Because if you have 6 hatches and then you're doing you get better and faster as time goes on. You get better and better, like skill-wise, your skill level goes up. You can start cutting those off. Be like, hey, I don't even need this extra hatch here. I can go down to 5 now. Hey, and before you know it, you rank up to Master League, and then you're like, hey, I only need 4 hatches now. Like I'm getting much better at this, and so that way, whatever it takes to keep your money low is what I teach people, because that's the most important thing. Even if you have to invest, if you think of like, I've coached lots of people that like they're like showing me a replay, and then they die with. They get eliminated with like 3,000 minerals, and they're just like, I'm just like, imagine if you had 3,000 minerals worth of roaches right now, what would happen? He's like, well, I would win that battle. And I was like, perfect. I was like, okay, now let's say you invested 600 minerals of that into 2 extra hatcheries. I was like, so now let's say you had, 2,500 minerals worth of roaches. Would you win that battle? And he's like, well, yeah, of course. And I was like, that's it. Like that's all. That's what I want you to do. Even if you have to use a little bit of an investment, the outcome would change. Would be completely different and totally alter the outcome of the game.
That's a good way to look at it. Let's get a little heady or more general. Do you think people should put less stock into pro replays? Because it seems like you're talking about a bad habit of a lot of new players is, oh, I watched this pro, this is what they did, so I'm going to do it. And then they just wonder why it's not working.
I think it's misleading to people because, I mean, it's like some people can do stuff like I can't do what Life can do right now, right? Like I aspire to do what Life does, but currently I can't do what Life did. And so does that mean that I should mimic everything Life did to the T? Because if so, the outcome of the game is not going to be the exact same. So I do think sometimes people put too much, like especially lower league players, put too much emphasis on what a pro player did at a tournament or did in a certain replay, to where it's like, this is how you do it. This is how it should always be done. Because I actually believe that even in Wings of Liberty, I still think there was better ways that never got figured out. I still think there was different things that we'll never know about. And I think with Heart of the Swarm, it's going to be the exact same way.
Yeah, we'll hit Legacy of the Void, and there'll be things that just never.
We'll all hit the reset button all over again, and
in 6 years or whenever the game comes out. But
yep.
Anyway, Kyle, did you have anything to say on that subject? I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. It's amazing. We asked that exact question: losing money and making sure you got rid of it, and just having larva. How much that just makes it so different than all the other races.
Yeah.
Well, what about maps? Is there anything that you have just downvoted or told everyone to just get rid of as a Zerg player?
I mean, I guess it still comes down to preference. There is let me see what the map is called, because I don't even remember. I do have Star Station and Core Hall City downvoted. And the reason for that is those are 2 4-player maps that Blizzard put in the map pool. I still play on Whirlwind, which is also another 4-player map, but Star Station has this thing to where if you're cross map, it's a great map. Absolutely great map. I love the design. You're really far away from your opponents, but if you're close positions, like either you're both on the ground or both at the northern positions, then you're literally like spitting distance from Terran. So their push is like at your door right off the bat. It reminds me of like how Steps of War was back in Wings of Liberty. So yeah, that I don't play that map, and I don't play what's the other one called? Core Hall City, because I don't like my natural also in my main. I just don't like it. It's supposed to be a 2v2 map, and they put it in the 1v1 map pool, I feel like. So I just like, no, I don't like this. This isn't fun.
Even as Zerg as a race that's pretty much always supposed to expand as soon as possible.
Yeah, because it gives your opponent like the easiest expansion to hold ever. Like you can't ever contest it unless you're dropping or nidusing, which is much easier said than done, considering Protoss warp in, and now they have the photon overcharge, which, by the way, if you've ever tried nidusing and then a photon overcharge goes down, it kills it in 2 shots. So it's pretty brutal to try to be aggressive or punish something from that. So it's not my favorite map to play, that's for sure. But I imagine if tournaments pick it up, like WCS picks it up and stuff, I'm just going to unclick those maps and just start practicing them, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the other one, I think everyone was saying They're downvoting is Neoplanet S. Now, do you like that? That's the one without a Zelnaga tower.
I actually do like that map. I really like that. It's hard, I find, for Zerg versus Terran because Terrans can constantly push from two different ways. But I do like the map, and I like the outlay, and I also like the animations of units dying, and they just slide everywhere. So I'm a big fan of that. You know.
You enjoy the flavor.
Exactly. It's something different than just the normal like forest tile set as well. So that might be another reason why I enjoy playing it. It's different to the eyes.
Yeah, my vote goes for more frost and more beach maps. Just from a aesthetic point of view.
Now, we've made it this far, and you haven't talked about Vipers at all. Not a fan?
I mean, this is really the thing with all of Zerg's new units, all their tools. The Swarm Host, situational. You can't just go them every game. You can't be like, I'm going to make Swarm Host this game, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way Swarm Hosts work. And then Vipers are the exact same way, except just a tier higher. So it's like, he's got Zealots, Archons. I better make Swarm Host. Like, no, or not Swarm Host, better make Vipers. It's like, nope, they actually won't help you a bit. So they're also another situational unit to where it's like, oh, he's going Colossus. Let me get some Swarm Hosts to help, or not Swarm Hosts, freaking Vipers. To help support my like roaches and hydras and stuff. So I do like the unit. I love the concept of the Viper and the Swarm Host, to be honest. It's just very specific on like builds or your army's unit composition, to where they're really effective or they're actually just kind of there taking up a lot of your resources and bank.
Cool. Very cool. Okay, that's sorry, I'm having a brain fart. Is that it for new units with the Zerg? Just Viper and...
They changed a lot of Zerg's units. I mean,
I consider the Hydralisk a new unit pretty much since now it's used.
This is the first time I've built one in years, so
yeah.
might as well be a new unit to us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The Ultralisk got changed to where they deal double damage now to light units. Or they just do a flat damage now to everything instead of just doing bonus to armored. So the Ultralisk is better. They can chop through Marines really quickly. What else got changed? The Muta obviously got a huge buff. It's now faster. Got the increased HP regen. So that's kind of like a new unit in a way, or a new toy for us to mess around with. And the Infestor got removed from the game. Shocking, I know, right? Like, the shame what happened to that thing.
Yeah.
I'm doing all right with the new fungal, but anytime I throw down the infested Terrans, I'm just bummed out because I love my Swarm Hosts. I'm getting the upgrades and Hydras. Hey, enjoying that upgrade. Yep. But not on the Infestor anymore.
Yeah. It's really depressing, like late game, when you throw out like 500 infested Terrans. You're like, I'm gonna kill something now, and then you realize that they have 3 upgrades, and then you're doing no damage. Like, the infested Terrans are just tickling, and you're like, afterward, you're just baffled. Like, why did I do that?
Have you seen any refocusing into neural parasite because of fungal being a little weird and infested Terrans kind of being useless?
I don't know. What would we fungal, or not fungal? What would we neural? Like, what would our targets be? Stalkers?
I mean, ideally, what I'm really excited to see is a Viper snaking into a Death Ball, grabbing out a Colossus, pulling it over to the Infestor, but, that's tough.
It's possible. But then we're also talking about, if I have enough gas for Vipers and Infestors, then our opponent has enough gas for Colossus and High Templar. So anytime you're pretending like you're going to pull something, or even if you try to, feedback has a longer range than the Viper's pull. So it could instantly just melt instantly. So that's one of the problems with relying on the Viper and solely in the late game. Like, they're a great asset, and they can do a lot of cool things, and it's a great unit, and the idea and concept of the unit is awesome as well. But it's not something that you rely on solely. Like, oh well, let me just build a few more Vipers, and I'll just pull everything, and that'll be the end of the game.
Well, then you need to be able to just chain it like freaking Scorpion in Mortal Kombat.
I think I say that every time I pull something, like, get over here. I think you have to, right?
Now, that's what. If only they had a teleporting kick where they just disappeared and showed up behind it. And,
I know.
It'd be great.
Great. I think Neural needs to be able to be casted from under the ground. That would be a way for people to use it again. Wouldn't that be cool?
Oh, please no. Oh, that sounds terrible.
You're not a Zerg then. I can tell.
Oh, mass neural. That's what we need.
Oh god, that would just horrify. Man, I push out with my Thors, all of a sudden, like 4 of them are taken by the ground. Oh, that'd just be terrible. I don't like that.
In the original beta, they could move with the unit too, so that's a wish I'd like back as well.
Yeah, that was rough. God, there was so much weird crap in the original Wings of Liberty beta.
There was.
I still want to be able to drop my barracks before putting down a supply depot. I'm just putting that out there.
Damn Terrans. All right, well, we got some fan questions here.
Indeed. Indeed we do. Who's up first? Wrathwort in the forums. This is from the StarCast.com/forum. He wanted to know, with Burrow available earlier, are burrowed banelings a viable option for defense, or is Burrow still too cost prohibitive in early game?
I mean, it's not too cost. I mean, it depends what you're planning on defending. I'm imagining we're talking about like Zerg versus Terran.
I would think so. And just you've got a bunch of bio
like,
coming up your ramp.
you know, he's coming at me with Hellions, and I have, you know, some burrowed banelings on my ramp. So when they come up the ramp, I'm going to detonate them, which could work. Obviously could work. But then it's also like they poke in there, and then they move back, and you blow up your banelings, and then you're like, well, darn, that was my only defense. Like, I hope he doesn't kill my drones now. So, of course, early burrow banelings could be something really cool. And I've actually experimented with going early burrow banelings, but not for actually like an early game advantage. I've actually burrowed him at my opponent's third base really early, to where later in the game, as the game progressed, he took his third, he sent all, you know, his base was fully saturated. I hit the X button and everything blows up. So then it was like, oh, that gave me an advantage. But it was something that I had to invest in early. So I don't know if, you know, it paid off so much, because if you think of, you know, sacrificing your minerals and gas early on compared to, you know, somebody who's just, you know, lost 10 SCVs at the 14-minute mark, like, which is actually worse, you know?
Yeah. That can be rough. It's almost, we were talking Widow Mines with Nama last week, and we were saying, what do you prefer for defense, Widow Mines or siege tanks? And he said, well, it's situational, but Widow Mines, if they're attacking you, you usually get one volley off. A siege tank will keep firing. So
right.
It's kind of the same thing. If you miss with those burrowed banelings, you're in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, it's the same. Like, that's actually the exact same, because it's like the players that have like four Widow Mines as their like entire defense, you know, and it's like, well, what happens if all 4 Widow Mines shoot? Then what? You know, so.
And I'm not clumped up.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, man. But what about some of my Zerg buddies really dig early burrow for early roaches, just because the healing factor when they're under is just absurd.
Yeah, it's really good. It's also another good way to have an early opening, just going like 10 slow roaches with like burrow.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of damage and make Terran burn extra scans and all kinds of stuff, to where it might be cost effective or a really good opening. Just depends.
Yeah. Rathford also asks, what would you tell a new player to help them decide to play Zerg over the other 2 races? Defend your race, sir.
Defend my race. Well, we're the best. We have, clearly. I mean, the pro players are obviously the most handsome, so, I mean... I don't really know. I mean, every race has such a different style of play, so it just depends on like the person. If they like, you know, if they're like a fan of the movie Predator, they shouldn't play Zerg. If you're a fan of the movie Alien, you should play Zerg. Like, that's, I don't know. It's just like, if you look at it, if you watch it and you like the idea and like the units and how it works, then I think that's the most important thing. Instead of trying to convince a friend or a buddy to play a race, I think the best way to get somebody to stay into the game is just let them play whatever's the most fun. So if they have more fun playing Terran, let them play Terran. If they have more fun playing Protoss, let them play Protoss. Like, my brother actually plays Terran, not because... And even if, though I could teach him Zerg way better than I could teach him Terran probably, he still rather play Terran because he has more fun at it. So to me, that's the most important thing when it comes to, you know, like a new player or just choosing a race.
Good words. Flameender in the chat room made a good point too. Starship Troopers is another good one. If you're rooting for the bugs in that, you should go Zerg. If you're rooting for the Marines though, then I guess you should try Terran.
Yeah, that's a tricky one because you could be a Terran or Zerg.
Yeah, or the second Aliens for that matter.
Right.
But the Marines don't fare too well in Aliens.
It's true. Zerg definitely dominates.
Well, and you lost the crate lifter with the Warhound.
Well, that's more the SCV, and they're not nearly as badass as the loader in Aliens. So
that's true.
Off topic, Jacob. Were you did you play on the first? Were you confused by all your workers being Warhounds?
I did play, and I didn't read about it beforehand, so I thought my game was like super bugged. I was like, "Oh crap!"
That would have been the best way to go into it.
I was just thinking, like, I'm gonna have to uninstall and reinstall my client now. Like,
that would have been the best way to find it out. We do another show on Mondays. That's like an all Blizzard news show. So we talk WoW, we talk StarCraft, we talk Diablo, and me and another host were complaining about the lack of interesting April Fool's jokes from Blizzard this year, and Kyle goes, "Guys, what are you talking about? All of your freaking workers are Warhounds." We're just like, "Oh, I take that back. That's awesome."
It was so confusing to expect that, and your cute little drone, but instead it's some man. He's like, "Let's go, let's make a pool."
It made me aggravated too. Like I couldn't. It took me forever before my eyes adjusted to be able to tell what was going on because so many players were doing like all ins, and it was just like Warhounds on Warhounds because I had to pull my drone. And so I was just like beyond confused. I couldn't tell what I was winning or what I was losing. So I think I lost like my first 4 games and I was just like beyond tilted. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm 6-pull until I lose. And so I 6-pulled, and I'm talking about like Grandmaster players. Everybody's Grandmaster I'm playing. I 6-pulled like the next 4 games in a row, beat every one. I just pulled all my Warhounds with it too. And I was like, man, this unit is OP. Like, this is the best April Fool's joke ever. So I ended up really enjoying the April Fool's joke, but I started off absolutely hating it.
Okay.
So,
all right.
fair enough. Blizzard definitely got me, though, because I had no idea what was going on until I read my chat, and they were like, April Fool's, blah, blah, blah. I had no idea. I was just like, what is going on? Why are my units Warhounds? Because I remembered the unit because I played the early beta, and so I was just really confused by the whole ordeal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice that they added a melee attack for them, too.
It is.
Yeah. Discarax asked, what composition do you recommend versus a late-game Sky Toss mix? What are the key steps to keep Toss out of this composition?
Well, I think, like I mentioned earlier, Zerg is no longer the defensive race as much as they are the aggressive race. So whatever you learned in Wings of Liberty, disregard it. Completely different. So now with being the aggressor, it's all about stopping Protoss from taking bases, pretty much, right? So you're constantly attacking, you're constantly looking for holes to poke in. I play Muta Swarmhost all the time. It's one of my favorite compositions to deal with Protosses, for example. So your Swarmhost can be placed anywhere and at any location. And another way you could actually use is, and you want to use like Nidus as well, you could just leave the Swarmhost in the Nidus the whole time. And then as your Mutas fly around and find different spots, you can just keep making Niduses and pulling the Swarmhost out, sending a wave of Locust. And so it draws Protoss to like spread thin to where he can't have all of his army in one big ball. So then you could have like, 8 Swarmhosts attacking his, let's say, 3rd or 4th base, and your Mutas can go right into the main. So it forces Protoss to not just move around, is pretty much, because if we just take it on every fight, just like we just attack, move into, you'll never beat a Protoss late game army composition. It's all about finding a hole or a weakness, or dealing. My personal experience dealing with a max Protoss army, like air army composition, with its like High Templars, Tempest, Void Rays, any of that kind of crap, carriers. The best army composition I've found is actually just max Mutas. It sounds like it doesn't work and it's like awful, but it's actually really strong versus the Sky Toss, due to the fact that, one, they're immobile. They're very immobile. So it helps you, again, to where you can just overexpand as much as you want. Another time, anytime you scout that your opponent is going like 3 or 4 Stargates or just max air right off the bat, overexpand right off the bat because they're not looking to apply pressure to you or try to be aggressive on you at any early point in the game. They're going for the 200, the most expensive army they can make, pretty much. And so engaging that, you can engage it and win, but it requires like 20 banelings and max mutas with 3/3 upgrades. So double spire, make mutas. You can beat Sky Toss. Now, if they do the smart thing and they make lots of phoenixes, you just make lots of corruptors too. So for every phoenix they have, make a corruptor. It's a good way of looking at it. So if they have 10 phoenix, make 10 corruptors. If they have 20 phoenix, make 20 corruptors. And so it can be dealt with. It is not easy by any means. And I think last night GSL, I didn't watch it, but I read all about it. I think Creator did that to Crazy Hydra and just like steamrolled him both games or something.
Well, the new Void Rays are definitely scary with the fact that they can turn on the bonus damage at any time. Granted, it's only versus armored, but we used to deal with those with things like corruptors. And now mutas seem to be the best option.
I love that change to the Void Ray because when it's over, you have this amazing window to just destroy the Void Rays.
And they've always had a problem stacking up, but still, they're just destroyers.
Yeah. Man, they tear through freaking bunkers, man. It makes me sad. Anyways, we'll take a couple of chat questions, too. They're kind of pouring in. We'll bounce back and forth.
All right.
Smeary, if that's how you pronounce that, wants to know how important is cheese / all-in defense and crisis management in live tournaments, and how do you prepare for these scenarios?
Oh man, these are the games that get burned into your memory. Like these are the games that you will either smile about or you'll just like wake up in the middle of the night pouring sweat, and you'll just remember the instance where I'll name one, WCS USA Finals. Kawhi Rice, we were 1-1. Kawhi Rice proxy 2-Rex bunker rushed me, and I died to it and got eliminated from the tournament. Bad experience to have, and so it's a huge deal being able to deal with that at live tournaments. It's where the most pressure comes on you. If you're it's just a normal game, you're in your comfort zone. It's like, all right, I'm just going to do the normal thing. I'm going to take 3 bases. I'm going to macro up, blah blah blah. But then when something like that happens, your heart stops for a second, and then it speeds up to about 10 times its normal speed, and it's all about defending that. So crisis management's huge in live events. It's also one of the worst things to also experience at live events too. Truth.
About to say, oh man, yeah, it's some of the stuff you see. I always think about that game where Idra tapped out to hallucinations. Anytime I think of an example of that, yeah, it's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah,
and even
a lot of tournaments he shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, it's rough.
Well, and last night, Bomber shot down his own flying command center accidentally. One misclick, looks away, and Marines.
I don't know how you misclick that.
Oh,
that's a big structure. Like I played a lot of games. I can't think of when I accidentally targeted down my hatchery.
That must have been before the show today, Kyle. Ben, because he's our other host on This Week in Blizz. He was just like, dude, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but you need to watch GSL. There's the most epic misclick of all time. So that must have been what he was talking about.
I'm sorry I ruined it for you.
It's okay. I'll still watch it, and I'm sure I'll forget about it by the time I get to it and be like, oh my god. That's rough. What do you mean, Jacob? You come on. You've killed a hatchery before.
Not my own hatchery. I don't think I have. If I have, I'm sure I would remember it. I'm sure
Queens don't do much damage against buildings, Garrett. But my queens have often found themselves attacking their own buildings. Luckily, they do crap for damage there.
Let's say, what do you do? Hit A instead of V? They're nowhere near each other.
Got big hands. I just fist the whole keyboard.
Oh man. Mick Dank, what a terrible name. Asks, once I get up.
That's one of my mods for my stream. It's a great
name.
Really?
Really? Oh. He might
take it back.
He's been wonderful in chat. It's just a less than wonderful. I mean, that's like if I use the screen names I made when I was in like 8th grade or something. It'd just be, good. Anyway, he asked, once I get up to 3 bases, drops seem to be the hardest thing for me to defend. As TOS, I just left a High Templar behind, but as Zerg, I feel leaving an Infestor at each base really stumps my main army power. Any thoughts?
I think if we're talking about, I'm sure when we're talking about drops, we're talking about Zerg versus Terran. So like I'm thinking Marine drops or Marine Marauder Medevac type drops. One thing that you should do instead of leaving an Infestor, because one Infestor does nothing now to a Marine drop, they just kind of overheal it, or it does no bonus damage to the Medevac either, which is armored now. They changed that. That was a big nerf to the Infestor. But you should actually just leave Zerglings and a Baneling, or and a couple Banelings behind, to be honest, at each base. Like, if you think of when you have 3 bases, your natural is never attacked. Like, how many times is your natural dropped compared to your outskirt bases? So it'd be like your main and your third would be the most likely bases to be attacked or dropped. So your army can sit somewhere in the middle between them, which is usually like your natural. And then you have some units in your main and then some units at your third to help defend instantly. And then if you need more, like if you see 3 medevacs coming over to your main, then you could send more of your units over that way. But you'll always have Zerglings and a couple Banelings to be there just to initially hold it off or stall the drop or the attack.
While we're on the subject of ZVT, Disco Rax asks, geez, that's tough to say.
Just call him Disco.
Disco, he asks, Hydralisks, how useful are they in ZVT?
They're pretty, I think they are useful in certain ways. I think the Roach Hydra style is actually not as bad as some people think it is. Like, I think Roach Hydra, and then you slowly tech to Vipers, it's pretty strong, even versus like Bio Mine, just because of the Blinding Cloud. It pretty much makes the Marines keep running into you, so it helps you to like zone out the Terran army. And then it also, if they're playing like Marine Marauder Siege Tank, you could abduct them or just throw a Blinding Cloud on them. So it is pretty useful. I wouldn't say you could go like Hydra Zergling Baneling. I don't think that would be so useful, just because of how much different upgrading you'd have to do. Like the Hydralisk would be fairly worthless if we didn't upgrade their attack, and then we're talking about a whole nother tree that we'd have to upgrade.
All right, cool. Oh, it's funny you mentioned Roach Hydra. He even the same guy even asks if you've found any way to work Roach Hydra into Zerg versus Zerg.
I mean, I have won with it before, but I wouldn't say it's something that is like a really reliable build, I would say, just because of any opponents that make like Zerglings, Banelings are going to crush it with like any kind of Muta opening. Like Ling Baneling Muta beats Roach Hydra, just because the Roach sure can tank well and they can deal with maybe the Zerglings, but they don't attack fast enough to deal with the Banelings. Like, if you think of how fast Marines and Marauders can attack while stemmed, and then you compare that to the Roach to protect, it's not going to work that way. And then the Hydras are all going to die, and then the Mutas come in to clean up, and then you're left dead.
Assume the fetal position behind your hatchery and start crying.
Pretty much, yeah. I've been there. I know what that's like.
It's the unlockable dance for a queen.
Creep, surprisingly comfortable to lay on. Who'd have thunk it? Chicka Chuck asked, how do you engage Widow Mines? Currently, I'm just move commanding past them to do as much splash to the Terran units as possible. Is this the right idea, or should I be doing something else?
I mean, it's kind of right. So the way that currently, which I just mimicked what Life did, which he just microed against it, right? To where mines were almost relatively unimportant at all in those matchups. Like, mines never really got good shots off against him. In fact, mines did just as much damage to Flash as they did to him. So pretty much the way of going about it is you separate some of your units that you send in first. And I'm not talking about like 2 or 3 Zerglings, because they're not going to proc the mines just because I'm sure his Marine force would take him out or something. But if we're talking about like an actual like Marine medevac and with a heavy Widow Mine army, you would just send some of your army in first and spread it out. So if you think of like how I think I mentioned this in the beginning too, how like Terrans had to learn to spread everything when banelings were coming at them, like Marines. Well, now Zergling, we have to learn to be able to attack move and spread our Zerglings out at the same time. So that's the new micro that very few people even do, but that's what's going to happen for Widow Mines to be defeated, or for the Marine, Marauder, Medevac, Widow Mine strategy to stop, for Zergs to stop saying OP or whatever. Like, that's how you have to deal with it. So you don't send your whole army in at the same time. You'd send probably, like 30 Zerglings or something ahead to spread all the and spread them out so that the mines all procced and fire, and then you'd be able to engage with like your Ling Baneling, Muta army or Infestor, whatever you have, just any army composition.
Good to hear.
I know using the Overseer and his Changeling drop became really popular this past week as a mode of dealing with that problem.
Yeah, to an extent. I mean, the problem is that if they have a Marine, like a lot of players now are just putting a Marine out in the front of his Widow Mine so that they all turn into a Changeling instead of like procting the mines. So another way is like using Overlords. I've seen certain players, like I think it was Snoot, used he grabbed like all his Overlords, like he got the speed upgrade and he just grabbed his regular Overlords, and as he attacked he just spread them all out so that they attacked took all the Widow Mine shots, and then his army killed the Terran Bio Ball. Of course he was supply blocked after this, so I guess you're gonna have to make more Overlords if you're planning on that. But there is that way, of course, to deal with it as well. I think it just kind of depends, and it's like very situational, maybe.
Yeah, certainly that doesn't work in the instance where maybe they pick up all their Widow Mines and walk into your natural, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure.
Evil. That's all I do now, dude. I just 200 cap myself with Widow Mines. I just walk them across the map and hope for the best.
That's what I assume.
I don't even know how you sleep at night.
On a pile of smoldering Zerg corpses.
After kissing a picture of a reactor.
Terrible.
Casey asks, what is a safe build or strategy to open up versus each race?
Are we just talking about like what skill level are we talking about that can perform this?
I think go.
I'm guessing like silver. We're looking for like a definitive answer for this guy.
Okay, beginning. Okay, so
I figured, if he doesn't already have one in his pocket, he probably is
so we'll talk about
the game.
Let's talk about like silver or goldish level. Okay, so versus Zerg, you make Mutalisk. So you would open with a 15 hatch, you would go a 16 pool, and then you would go a 16 gas. That's a standard opening that you would go versus Zerg. Or you could go, of course, I'd say that's probably the normal opening. And then you would go into Baneling Nest after your Zergling speed, and then you would go into Lair right after you have 100 gas after Baneling Nest, and then you would grab all 3 gases at the same time. So then you would be on 4 gases, and you pretty much make drones all the way up until your Baneling Nest is 50% done, and then you make 4 Zerglings. And you make 4 Zerglings when your Baneling Nest is 50%, so that they're completely hatched by the time your Baneling Nest is up, which if he was rushing you, that's when you would need to turn your Zerglings into Banelings, of course. So that's a standard for ZVZ. And then, of course, once your layer is complete, throw down your Spire, you make Zerglings, you make Mutas, you win the game. And then Zerg versus Terran, I would say a standard would be, since Reaper is so common now, like Reaper openings everybody's doing it. Like flavor of the month, I guess you could say. It would be a 15 hatch, a 16 gas, and a 16 pool would be the opening. So that the reason we're taking the gas before the spawning pool is so that we can get Zergling speed the minute our spawning pool's finished. So we can start the Zergling speed, and that way, the faster we get Zergling speed, the faster we can stop our Terran player from being able to harass us with Reapers or Hellions or anything like that, because Zergling speed gives Zerg map control, pretty much. And then you would go into, still think Ling Baneling is the strongest currently. I mean, Roach Hydra obviously can work, and I've won lots of games versus Bio Terrans with it, or even Meching Terrans. But I do think that Ling Baneling is currently the strongest in the metagame, just because if you can micro your Zerglings right versus the Widow Mines, then they can obviously deal with the Marine medevac army compositions. So I would just go in after I had my expansion up and running and I had Zergling speed and map control. I would just drone up. I would take a third base at around 9 minutes. You go double evolution chamber upgrades, and then tech into layer and throw macro hatches in there depending on how much money you have. Pretty much. That's it. You work on economy always as Zerg, and you only make army when your opponent's attacking, coming towards you, or you're going to attack him. There's no other time to make army. Never make a Zergling, a Roach, a Muta, nothing if you're just going to leave it in your base. There's no reason to have it. A Spine Crawler would be better. It would be better to make 2 drones and turn one of them into a Spine Crawler than to make 2 Roaches or 3 Roaches, because at least we're getting some economy out of that if we're not going to be aggressive. And then for Zerg versus Protoss, you go 15 pull, and then we go 16 hatch. So you have to go pull first versus Protoss, because if you don't, they could easily block your expansion with a pylon, or even worse, you make a fast expansion versus Protoss, but then they cannon rush you and you lose the expansion. It's way worse. It's a bad situation to be in, because you're just like, screw it, we're all in, you know. And then you just start sending Zerglings or Roaches off one base, and then you lose and get frustrated, and then you're like, Protoss OP, cry, post on Twitter.
I was about to say, that's when you log into the official StarCraft forums and start an incredibly helpful thread.
Yep, that's it. So that's the initial opening, and then it all depends on what your opponent's doing. Roach Hydra, I would say, is the absolute standard and the easiest to perform. So just go Roach Hydra. If your opponent's going all like gateway units versus you, switch into Swarm Host, so it's like Roach Hydra and Swarm Host. If your opponent's going Colossus, tech up to Hive, get Vipers. They're a fun unit to play around with regardless whether you win or lose. It's really an enjoyable experience just building them. And so that kind of sums up a basic opening.
That was excellent. Thank you.
Hope that helps. No
awesome.
problem.
Well, we're damn near at the end of the show here, and Kyle, you really haven't touched on the unit that gives you a nerd boner. I've heard very little Ultralist talk. What's going on here?
Well, he said it's good. Like, they're good now. Situational, but good.
All right. I was truly expecting Jacob to step into this episode and Kyle just to be like, well, what about Ultras in this scenario or that scenario?
No, my real issue is wanting to use Swarm Hosts and everything, because they're awesome. And when you have a successful Swarm Host game, not only are you denying space, controlling the map, but you're having a great time.
Yeah, you really are. Definitely.
That's good stuff. So, sorry, Kyle, go ahead.
Oh, but before we close it off, let's take some questions from the chat. They were eager earlier, and we got some time now.
All right. If you type in all caps, it will not be asked. I'm sorry. It's a bad way to do things.
It's on Garrett's bad side, for sure.
Well, because if I read it, I have to read it yelling, and that hurts my throat.
Got a lot of questions about Imbalance. I'm quite pleased at the pace that Blizzard's going at the moment. I'm glad they're giving it some time.
Yeah, were you on the bandwagon right after MLG, Jacob, where everyone was just like, nerf medevacs, they need to be nerfed?
I think some things still need to be changed, but some people go way to the extreme, I feel, right? Like, yeah. I feel like medevacs need to be changed in a way to where there is a reason. There's like, you think of almost any ability or spell in the game, and then there's a time and a place, like there is a risk and a reward type of thing for using it. But if you look at like medevac speed, for example, costs nothing. There's no reason not to always use it, right? There's no situation. And I feel like if it was something to where it'd be like a situational type thing, it'd be much more awesome in the spectator thing too. Like, oh my God, and he just got enough energy, for example, used the medevac speed and got away, for example. I don't know. There could be lots of different instances.
Right.
So I don't know how you would necessarily fix it, but I do think there is a problem that it costs nothing, and you can use it as much as you want to zip and zoom around the map, run away from mutas at any time, and it doesn't ever cost anything, whether it be energy or maybe just the cooldown needs to be longer. I don't know.
All right. Actually, here's a an interesting question that I'm surprised didn't get brought up when we were talking basics. How much supply room do you allow before you make your overlord? That way you can just continue to produce without being supply capped. Because it's kind of it's different with Zerg because it costs a larva, and like with Terran you just always kind of want to have a supply depot making at all times, and once you get off of one base you just have two making at all times. Do you flood? Do you do them steadily? How do you do your overlords?
Well, I kind of just always do it when I have like 4 or 5 supply free. I'll usually make an overlord, but there actually is a trick that you could do. Like I just never like made myself do it to where it just became like a muscle memory. Every time your inject is done, you can build an overlord and then build any army you want, and you'll never be supply capped. You'll always be perfect no matter what you're building. So every time your main inject finishes, build an overlord, build the other 4 into drones or whatever. You go to the other base, build an overlord, build the other 4 or 5 into drones or roaches or whatever you're building, and you're never supply capped. And it's like some people think it's like a really good way of keeping yourself so that you can play the whole game and actually never run into a supply cap problem.
I think you just drastically fixed my Zerg play.
Could be.
I never thought of that. I'm supply blocked so much when I go Zerg in team games and stuff. It's bad.
It's okay. I am too. So is Stefano. Stefano does the gets supply blocked at 120 supply, and then he makes 9 overlords at once, and then he just continues to macro out. So
yeah, every time I watch like a day 9 where he's picking apart Stefano builds, it's like, and now he floods overlords.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Got a question from Jason asking, what should I do against early Reaper pressure?
Oh, if we're talking about the 888 build, which is the earliest Reaper pressure there is, the best way of dealing with it is actually just to drone scout at like 12. If you drone scout 12, you can get in their main, you see what they have, and you can instantly tell what they're doing, because if you don't see a Rax, but you see a gas taken, right there, okay, it's a proxy Reaper, because there's nothing else it could be. I mean, I guess it could be a proxy Marauder, but let's be realistic here. That ain't killing anything. Like, there's no one's going to proxy Marauder a Zerg. Or do a fast proxy factory or something. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So it's going to be a proxy Reaper. And the way to deal with it, once you see it, just don't make another drone until after you already have your hatch and your pull. So it'd be like 15 hatch, and then it would be 14 pull right after. And so then you can go back to making drones or whatever. It's about getting lings out and your queens out as pretty much fast as possible. If it's a proxy, I don't worry about getting Zergling speed for super early, because by the time, if you're rushing for Zergling speed, you might already be dead by that time, but just because for taking too much damage from the Reapers, like drone wise, if you lose 8-10 drones from the 2 Reapers that get in your base, you're probably not going to recover from it, whether you have Zergling speed in 45 seconds or not. So I think one of the best ways and tricks to micro, like practice-wise, when Reapers get in your base and your spawning pool is not done, is to actually grab 5 drones and tell it to attack the Reaper. And then the Reaper has to move back, because he can't just sit there and take the damage. So as he's moving back and attacking, you pull back the ones he hits. So he hits the first drone twice, and so you pull it back, and then the next drone you pull back, and the next drone you pull back, and then before you know it, your spawning pool is going to be done, and then you can go ahead and build Zerglings, and then your queens, of course, and then I would just keep making Zerglings and queens until you dealt with it, no problem.
Awesome. I need to get better with my Reaper play. I'm terrible at it. I'm really bad with Reapers.
It's been useless for a long time. I mean, that's like saying I never made Hydras again.
Oh, that's a good point, but I feel like jumping on the Hydra train's been a little easier. I don't find them as micro intensive, or I don't know, Jacob. Maybe I'm just doing it wrong.
I don't know. Probably you're doing it wrong. I'm just gonna be honest.
More than likely, it's tough. It's absolutely okay. Anyways, so well, I think that'll just about do it for this episode. Jacob, man, as always, you're just such a blast having on the show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being on here. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Yeah. Before we let you go, where can people find you, and is there anything you'd like to promote?
I just want to promote myself because I'm awesome. So
sure.
obviously follow me on Twitch at Twitch TV/LzGamer TV. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at LzGaMer, and be sure to look out for me on Heart of the Swarm, because I plan on doing a lot of awesome things, especially with WCS and MLGs and stuff coming up. So yeah, look out for me.
Awesome. Well, go do that.
You can also find a lot of your great replay packs that you've been putting out recently.
Yep, I've been putting replay packs. You can search Team Liquid under LzGaMer, and you can find them that way, or you could just search under Reddit as well. I think I upload them to both. And there's something else I was going to say too. Nope, don't know. It left me, just like gone.
It was probably.
But thank you guys for supporting me. How about that? We'll end it with that. Like, thank you
Sure.
for supporting me, everyone who watches my stream, and you know, all my students who I've taught over the last 5 years. Thank you guys. You're all awesome, and yeah, appreciate it.
Awesome. Where can people go if they want to get into being coached by you?
Well, usually I just have them email me, so I could put my email out there, I guess. Is that safe?
How else would they find it to get coached?
Well, I used to go through Coaching, and
Okay.
they haven't been updated in a while, so I don't know if they still go through there and that works. So I just had people like directly contacting me, since I don't know what's happening with that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that's fine.
NASL owns Coaching, so I think NASL and stuff's like their main priority, and the other's like a side project. So
I can see that.
Definitely.
They're busy over there. They've been really cranking out their production. Anyways, I guess we'll do our outro. Kyle, big thanks to everyone who left us a review in the iTunes store. It always helps the podcast. Brett from Miami said that this podcast is a message from the Xel'Naga. Heed their words wisely, Templar. And Glarb, who said that he's been listening to us since the Wings of Liberty launch and has returned since Heart of the Swarm and feels like he never left. So you could have kept listening in between. We're wonderfully off topic enough to where if you weren't playing StarCraft, you would have enjoyed it. Or you would have heard one of Jacob's many other episodes, which are all awesome, would have made you play Zerg and get back into the game.
Definitely.
Anyway, StarCast is a production of amove.tv. You can find this and many other awesome shows like This Week in Blizz or our new show, the Campaign Roundtable over there. We're going through the Heart of the Swarm campaign right now on Campaign Roundtable. Did you play the campaign, Jacob?
I did.
Did you have a good time?
Actually played the Wings of Liberty campaign right before HotS came out, so it was like fresh, and so I played both of them pretty much back to back, and I enjoyed the Heart of the Swarm campaign way more than the Wings of Liberty. It was really fun. It was really easy though. That was like my beef with it. But then people are like, well, sure, it's easy for you. You're Grandmaster.
No, it's just because Kerrigan's a broken unit.
I know, right?
She's so overpowered.
I was depressed though after I went to ladder and she wasn't with me, and I was like, if only I had Kerrigan right now, I'd win this battle.
No,
you know?
If only I had auto-healing queens, I'd win that battle. That's what I was thinking. I want the queens from the campaign, man. Those things are ridiculous. Anyways, check out thestarcast.com. Make sure you put the in front because someone else owns starcast.com. Those bastards. But that's a place to go for our forum, our archives, t-shirts, and plenty more. You can catch us live every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/thehandsomenerd. Go and follow it. There's many other handsome nerds on this channel as well. You can catch all of our VODs on youtube.com/StarCastShow, and of course the podcast on the Frog Pants Studio Ultra feed at frogpants.com. Email us, starcastshow@gmail.com. That's where we got some of the questions for LZ today. We're going back to our normal format next week. We'll be talking news, we'll be talking tournament results, and we'll be taking emails from you guys. Follow us on Twitter at the StarCast. Follow me at Garrett Art, Kyle at Kyle Ferguson, and our guest today at LzGaMer. And a big thanks to our production crew, Octane Pro and Captain Noobing, for all they do for our show. Check out nomoonart.com for my design work. And Kyle, where can people find you?
You can also find me at Biggest Fan Podcast, where we followed the fad that's driving you mad. This past week, I was driven mad by Greek yogurt. It was an interesting experience. Slightly delicious, not all of them, but we had a good time on that show. This next week is Harrison Ford week, after his slightly scandalous interview on Entertainment Tonight, I believe, as well as his upcoming appearance in the Anchorman 2, and in general, him becoming a grumpy old man as he gets older.
Okay. That show is so delightfully wonky, dude. I love that show.
Oh, yeah. It's a nice wacky break in the middle of my slightly serious news-related week.
Awesome. Check out our sponsors, doghousesystems.com, tweakedaudio.com, and sc2quoteoftheday.com. Our code is StarCast. It gets you double memory on your next Doghouse Systems gaming rig, 30% off and free shipping on your entire order of earbuds from tweakedaudio.com. And just go to sc2quoteoftheday.com or follow them at sc2quotes for awesome, up-to-the-minute quotes from the StarCraft 2 community. So until then, guys, we will see you next week with episode 147. And one last time, thank you, Jacob. We'll see you again.
Thank you.